I was in Ramallah, and there's this checkpoint that's called the Kalandia checkpoint that Palestinians go through when they're going to Jerusalem from Ramallah. And this checkpoint, it's almost like a terminal, and there are these gates that are like the turnstiles, the floor-to-ceiling turnstiles at a New York City subway. And the people who control these gates are these young female conscripts who are just sitting in a glass booth, and they press the button and the gate moves. And these girls are bored out of their skulls. So they are dicking around on Facebook and taking selfies and texting with their boyfriends, while this line of like 100 Palestinians is just like suffering and sweating and jammed like cattle, right? And sometimes the girls, like, they'll press the button and they won't press it long enough, and you'll get stuck in the terminal, right? And so there was this moment where there was this beautiful young Palestinian woman who looked really cool. She had these like black glasses, like an old Hollywood movie star, and she had the most perfect eye makeup and like red lips. She was just really glamorous, you know, and she was stuck in the turnstile, and she just like looked over her glasses with this look of like, fuck you, just total contempt at the turnstile, at the whole apparatus of control and separation. And I sort of surreptitiously snapped an iPhone photo of it that I drew from later, because to me that like symbolized everything. It was like this apparatus of fear, and then this young woman being like, you know, fuck you, and with all of her self-possession and all of her beauty. I guess I'm part of a milieu of journalists that came up around 2011. A lot of us came up reporting around Occupy Wall Street. And I had a very close friend named John Neffel, and he was reporting on Guantanamo Bay. It's a place that's very, very difficult for photographers to cover. You can point your camera anywhere you want, except you can't have anyone's face in the shot. And you can't have any doors in the shot, and no windows either, and no security cameras, and not more than one wall. And so before you know it, your camera, right, is pointing directly at the ground. What interested me was the prospect of doing something with my art that a photograph couldn't do because of censorship. It was literally a place that I could draw around military censorship, which is what I did. I drew the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed pretrial hearings. I drew the force-feeding chairs, where people had, you know, tubes shoved down their throat into their stomach to stop the hunger strike that they were doing against indefinite detention. I even, for a few seconds, drew the prisoners. And I drew with a military minder over my shoulder in conditions where I was being like hauled from one place to the next. But I drew as a way of subverting that censorship so that people could see what America was doing. I was very bad at being a child. When I was young, I hated stupid people unjustly deploying authority and then trying to justify this with appeal to essentially irrational principles, right? I think I could just never reconcile myself to that. Not that all authority is bad, I don't think that, but authority that's irrational, that's stupid, that's cruel, that has no justification but its own perpetuation is something that, like, in my heart, I loathe it. I loathe it to its very core. I guess maybe at my core I'm motivated by freedom. Life's been really good to me, so I feel a little bit silly saying that I have a chip on my shoulder when I've been given such, such blessings in my life. But maybe my chip on my shoulder is for other people. Maybe my chip on my shoulder is for, like, this really smart young kid that I knew in Abu Dhabi who was relegated to being a guy who served tea just because he was a working-class Pakistani kid, right? Maybe my chip on my shoulder is for an old woman that I reported on who was thrown out of her home of 30 years because a real estate investment trust bought her building and was just kicking everyone out of it. And this elderly woman who worked her whole life, right, as a secretary and has a husband with Alzheimer's is just, like, thrown out on the street. I came to journalism not, like, as someone who went to J school and who, interned at the New York Times. I didn't come to it as, like, an AP Wire reporter who had a house style they had to hew to. I came to journalism as someone who wanted to be a writer. And because I wanted to be a writer, I felt free to use all sorts of literary devices that other writers do, including saying what my opinion was, including saying what the world looked like visually, how it smelled or tasted, including relating what I'm seeing to history, to poetry, to literature, right? It's because it's essentially more honest, right, than pretending that I'm not there, than pretending that I'm just like some sort of like little camera or listening device. I mean, we're humans, and our presence somewhere in some way or another affects how things happen a lot of times. There's all sorts of reasons I capture the images that I do when I'm traveling. Sometimes it's quite simple. I was in Lviv, and there were all these balconies that were held up by stone nymphs. They looked so cool. And I wanted that. I wanted to make it mine. And that's the thing about beauty that's so crazy. No one can possess beauty. Beauty is just there. And then as soon as you look away, you're no longer in possession of it. And I think that there's something about making art that's about that covetousness to try to possess that beauty, right? To try to transmute it, to make it yours, have it go through your eyes and then out your hands. Well, my mom taught me how to draw. My mom is an amazing illustrator. She draws like I would draw maybe if I was a nicer person. And my mother comes from a line of artists. Her uncle, Lawrence, was an artist. Her grandfather was an artist who taught her how to draw. I went to a terrible art school for 3 years. I also learned by drawing. I drew constantly. I would study masters like Toulouse-Lautrec, my short, absinthe-drinking, embittered hero. I would go into the Mughal miniatures section of the Met, and I would just like marvel at like the fineness of the lines. My mother gave me a book that's called Complete Rendering in Pen and Ink by Arthur Guptill. It's one of these like fascistically mean 1920s illustration books, and I would do all the exercises. Also, my man Fred, he's an artist, and he's older than me. And when I was 20 and we got together, he also made me draw, and he taught me a lot. And then I had friends, and when artists are together, especially when you're younger, you're competitive. And I think it's just this constant wanting to be better, because to be an artist is always to be a failure in your own eyes. So because my mom was a working illustrator, I never thought of art as some like pie in the sky thing that you couldn't make a living off of. To me, it was exactly as much of a trade as carpentry. And so I always was turning to art to make money. Like from when I was young, I would put up signs in bodegas, advertising to draw people's pets or their kids. Obviously, it's different to report visually and to write, and it's also different to report visually through photography or videography rather than to report old school with a sketch pad like I do. Writing is something that essentially is slow, right? You're gathering facts, you're doing interviews, you are learning a historical background, you're going to a place, you're taking notes, you're looking through documents, you're taking all of these different things, right? And you're trying to synthesize that. Whereas when you draw, you're there. Especially with what I was doing with Guantanamo. This isn't always the case, but it's the case when I'm working journalistically. You're there and you're capturing what's right in front of you, and it's direct. And that's fundamentally different than spending 2 months trying to, dig through archives and interview lawyers. One of the things that I've been really proud of is that an incredibly diverse group of people love my work, a group of people who I think would probably hate each other if they were at a dinner party. My work doesn't just hang on like the walls of New York hipsters or collectors. It's also, something that people in like labor camps in Abu Dhabi have, right? It's something that taxi drivers hung in their windows of their cars. I feel like by being interested in the world in kind of a general sense without a lot of artificial divisions and without feeling like these are the smart people, these are the dumb people, these are the classy people, these are, people that don't matter. I guess by being interested in the world more generally, I think that a large variety of people are interested in me as well. I have my friend Lina Sergi Atar. She is a Syrian American who has a charity that's called Karam Foundation that works with displaced Syrians, especially with Syrian refugee kids. She brings a bunch of people together, and we would go to like youth centers in southeast Turkey on the Syrian border, and we'd work with these kids. I did these crazy like allegorical murals that have all of these like little mice that are getting together to kind of like trick cats and pull their tails and, you know, wear cat masks. And I guess I wanted something that was both like appropriate for kids, because there was, you know, like there's little kids here. There's like 7-year-olds, you know, but also that was something that did have the message of people working together, right? That did have the idea that like organization and protest could accomplish something.